Recently, as many of you have seen, I have been on a nostalgia kick with the Lego Island games. Having the opportunity to look back at these has really given me perspective on where we once were in technology and how far we've come since then. This has led me to seek out more of my childhood games to relive the experiences once again, and that endeavor has brought me here, to Lego Loco. Released in November of 1988, Lego Loco offered a simple open-world construction experience focused on rail transportation. The game focused on giving the player free roam of the land to build whatever he or she desired, and then once all is said and done, control the trains that connected their world. This game was actually the first game released by Lego Media and was a direct result of the commercial success Mindscape's Lego Island. Of course, we know what happened here, and unlike Mindscape, Lego Media continued to get better and better with each game they released. It is interesting to note that Lego Loco came out in a time where Micro Machine playsets were huge. Micro Machines, for those who don't know, were miniature vehicles modeled after real-world cars and trucks. Along with these vehicles came playsets that featured urban and rural landscapes that you could populate with your Micro Machines. I remember having a ton of interconnectable city tiles that would take up my entire bedroom floor. I would spend hours reenacting chase scenes and races through all of these sets. Maybe someday I'll talk more about them, but for now, let's get back to Lego. We start, of course, with the story. There is none. Next.
No, you get back there and you do a review.
There is no story. How am I supposed to talk about something that doesn't exist?
I don't care. These people came to listen to a review, so you get creative and you do something. Do not make me get Council of Trenton here to talk about trains.
Jeez, alright, okay. Just calm down. I'll figure something out. Just leave him out of this. Honestly though, there really isn't a story. Instead, creating the story is left to the player, and in true toy box game fashion, I glassed the world and started from scratch. I tried to make a conscious effort to make a semi-realistic world separated into 4 different districts. So welcome to the world of Brickopolis. In the upper right-hand corner, you have the Arts District, with an opera, library, and a very nice path that allows my citizens to see fountains and statues as they stroll by. Overall, it's a pretty peaceful place, and I was surprised at how much space the play world actually gave me to create my ultimate Lego world. Next, I started on the residential section, in the lower right corner. I wanted to make sure that my citizens not only had access to the train network, but also to a diverse roadway in case they wanted to drive to their destinations. After that was finished, it was on to the industrial sector. Solar farms are found here that provide the power to the city, along with a few factories that manufacture new bricks so that my citizens can keep on building. I added a rail siding here as well, and really didn't have a plan for it, but I wanted to populate the system with more than just one train. After a while of building, I made a tanker train and had it parked there. Like I said, mostly for aesthetics. Just down from the industrial sector is the commercial sector. Here we find most of the larger businesses and amenities like grocery stores, the pizza parlor, and the skate shop. I did add a train stop to this area, and I have to manually switch the tracks to allow access to either this area or the industrial sector, but I kinda like that chaos. Lastly, I added the country area of the map, and even though the trains go right next to it, I didn't have a dedicated stop for them. The citizens who live there are content with their lives and have fields that they can populate with animals. I did add a pathway along with a roadway, so they did have options on how to get around. Finally, I added the remaining scenery to complete the build, and voila! My world is complete and I can finally play in it. Although, to be honest, this game suffers from the same drawbacks as the Sims games, as in it's more fun to build the world than to play in it. As a kid though, I enjoyed both, and would spend a few hours each play session tweaking things and hunting for secrets. There, are you happy now? I made it. Oh, he's gone. Never mind. Lego Loco is really underwhelming in the audio department. There are numerous sound effects, but no real music besides the opening scene and the main menu. Actually, it took me a bit by surprise when halfway through building my awesome world, I realized how quiet the game really was. To be honest, I'm a little on the fence here, because half of me wants to say that it doesn't need music, and the other half thinks that even a calm Sim-style track would have been just fine. Being that I had no memory of whether or not there was background music, and the fact that it took me so long to realize it this time, lends to the notion that maybe Lego Loco doesn't need it. That being said, if we were to get a re-release today, there would have to be background music, as that has become the industry standard. With the lack of this music, the world you build relies heavily on the sound effects I mentioned earlier. Not to get ahead of myself, but I do need to mention that there are two modes in this game: build mode and play mode. Each of these modes have different effects to convey either what you are building or things happening in your world. For instance, while in build mode, each thing you place enters the world with a click in an attempt to evoke the same response had when building with real Legos. At the same time, when removing objects from your world with the eraser tool, we hear the scratching of sandpaper and a cartoon bubble pop to signify that the item has disappeared. It's satisfying, but can get repetitive over time, especially when adding or removing many things at once. Once you close the toy box, the world comes alive and you enter play mode. Depending on what and how much you have built, the effects can be slightly overwhelming at first. Right away, the wind began to blow, the clock tower began to chime, and a few secrets were unlocked with sounds of a bunch of Lego bricks being put together. The effects and mixing are not the greatest in this mode, with world ambience like wind sometimes looping over each other and then abruptly stopping, leaving a very jarring silence. I think things like this can be overlooked easily enough, especially when you get into managing your train network and interacting with the world. Now, of course, what would a game about trains be if I didn't talk about the trains? Overall, they fit the build. Visually, they're the only 3D looking thing in the 2D world. Since this game was not super advanced, I would say that it was just a series of sprites to make it look 3D, like when the trains move through corners. Audio for the trains follow the same quality as the sound effects, but is on a never-ending loop while the train is running. If you listen closely enough, you can even hear the start of a new loop. But once again, for a kid, things like this would go unnoticed. Overall, the sounds do well enough to tie the aesthetic of Lego Loco together. Visually speaking, I think the miniature models of each building are faithfully recreated to keep things semi-realistic while making it feel like it's still Lego. Looking at them, you can tell that they are not all modeled after Lego sets. Some things are, like the police station and some of the houses. But things like the petrochemical building and the solar farms are made to look just Lego enough to let them fit into the world. There's just enough blockiness to make you think, oh, I could build that in real life. Besides the world, the main focus point is the trains. Honestly speaking, the modern train style, like the one I used in my world, fits nicely. However, the other two just don't match the aesthetic. You can see in my world where I parked the tanker train, and it just looks awful. It also serves no purpose as tankers and freight cars don't do anything. But that's more of a gameplay gripe. Speaking of which, let's talk about that next. As I said before, there are two modes in this game: build mode and play mode, with one, at least to me, being way more enjoyable. I mean, what did you expect? I play Factorio for fun. Building in Lego Loco can be tedious. You are given a lot of space and a decent selection of buildings, scenery, rails, and roads. You can make anything from a basic loop to a sprawling train network. The game really gives you that freedom. There is no limit, besides screen space, to the amount of things that you can have in your world. Once all is built, you enter play mode, and from this point on, playability gets somewhat boring. Now, one thing I will say is that LEGO Media Group was ambitious, and knew that they had to have a mechanic in the game to let people play with friends. Remember, this was during the time that the internet was starting to grow and evolve into what we have today. LEGO saw the possibilities and created a very basic but fun way of sending postcards, essentially emails, to friends by using the train network. This type of messaging predates things like MSN and AIM by years, but was a really cool concept for a children's game. Of course, if you didn't have friends who owned the game or had access to the internet, like me, you could still use the service, but you would be limited to a number of predefined NPC characters such as the train driver, the mayor, or even the Loch Ness Monster. They could be mailed and then they would return your mail with a predefined response, normally something pretty silly. The fun part of mailing someone was making the postcard. I spent hours making these and sending them out to NPCs just to see what they would say. The postcard creator is full of options to create the best image to send to whoever you want. You could really get creative if you wanted to, and in this playthrough, I spent some time creating the perfect postcard, and sent it to the mayor who was running my precious creation. Soon after my mail train returned from its trip, another arrived carrying a response. Looking at the postcard, I figured my target knew exactly what was coming. But then I read it, and I realized, nope, he's just as brainless as I thought he was. Other than that major feature, you spend your time in play mode switching tracks and making sure trains don't crash into each other. Or crashing trains into each other, your choice. You bring passengers to different stations, watch them interact in the world. You can even go a step further and click on each citizen. This pulls up a portrait and allows you to change their name. This feature doesn't really serve a purpose other than world building, but it was fun when I was a kid as I would name my citizens after people I knew, and then watch them live their pathetic little lives. Actually, going back... Can't keep a straight face on that. Their pathetic little lives. Actually, going back to the customization of the world, you can rename just about anything. You can be as detailed or as vague as you want, and that's always a nice option when a game allows it. Once you are satisfied or your parents tell you to go outside, you can just close the game and come back to it whenever you want. You're only allowed the one world, but you can come back and rebuild it whenever you see fit. This was a really nice feature back in its day, as most kids would forget something like saving before closing out of the game. Oh, one last thing I almost forgot. To be honest with this was one of the coolest selling points of the game. The option to use Lego Loco as a screensaver. This was the pinnacle of cool, as screensavers were such a new concept to me as a kid. And although I really couldn't get it working in Windows 10, I do vividly remember watching it while I ate my lunch or dinner, just waiting to get back to playing my world. I don't think there's much more to talk about in this department, so I will end with my final thoughts. Going back to the game, I had my doubts and concerns. For one, there is little to no support for it. Unlike other titles like Rock Raiders, Lego Loco did not capture the hearts of Lego maniacs. So finding ways around glitches or problems is really up to you. However, it did what it was made to do, and I really enjoyed the hour or so that I played it. So as with all my other Lego games, the question has to be asked, should you play this? To which, I'll say yes. I had no real hiccups installing it, I even installed it right from the disk, and it ran just fine. Except there were a few settings I did have to tweak. And sure, you have to run it in a less than ideal resolution, but once you get over it, it's completely worth it. Don't expect more than a few hours of fun once you complete your world though. I quickly grew bored managing my trains, but that didn't derail me from my overall experience. Dad joke! With my thoughts complete, I want to say thank you to everyone who made it this far. I hope you enjoyed this retro review, and I would love to hear your feedback in the comments below. But for now, we'll see you in the next one. Until then, bye-bye.